Welcome to Babes in Bookland, your women's memoir podcast. I'm your host, Alex Franca. Today, I'm sitting down with Ayana Lage to discuss her memoir, Missing Me, a memoir of postpartum psychosis and the long road back. It's the story of her postpartum psychosis, yes, but it is so much more than that. It's about the pressures of perfectionism, anxiety, self-criticism, and what it looks like to finally stop shrinking yourself and accepting yourself instead. If you'd like to further support the show, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Patreon for exclusive bonus content. You can also grab some cute merch from our store at TeePublic. Thanks for being here. Hi, Ayana. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Happy Pub Day, by the way. How are you feeling?
Thank you. I feel like every emotion possible. Both, excitement that this has finally kind of come to fruition and fear that people won't like it and, that it won't sell and all of the things that you think as an author. But
Yeah.
mostly I'm grateful, I would say.
I've had a couple of authors liken it to childbirth, and you've
Yes.
experienced that. Do you feel like that's a really good comparison?
Yeah, honestly, this may be more agonizing. Labor and delivery was difficult, but it was very short in comparison. So yes, I definitely feel the comparison there.
I think your memoir is going to do really well because I couldn't put it down. It's under 200 pages, but you pack in so much, so much. I think it might be one of the best examples of less is more in memoir than I've ever seen. And I just commend you for trusting yourself and your story and the way that you told it and not having all this weird filler in. And what I assume to be merely a memoir about your experience with postpartum psychosis is about so much more. The pressures we all feel and we all face in varying degrees. It's a reckoning with faith, with blame, with medication, with mental health, with motherhood. It's honest, vulnerable, searing. It's funny. It exposes harsh truths and you cite your sources. And ultimately, it's about letting go of the need to be perfect, about piecing yourself back together, and about realizing that you deserve to be pieced back together.
Thank you, Alex. You sold it just now better than I ever could.
Oh, well, thank you. I
Thank
mean,
you.
really, I think your memoir is incredible, and I think it is going to be so relatable to so many people.
Thank you.
Thank you for putting it out there. Okay, so before we dive into your memoir, let's talk about the process. So, you have shared your life and your story online for how many years?
Yeah, a long time. More than a decade, I would say. Yeah.
What was it like, though, to sit down and realize, all right, I want to tell this story in memoir form?
So I always say that I had a unique experience, I feel like, as an author, and that my agent came to me and was like, emailed me kind of cold calling almost to say, like, hey, I think that you could write a book. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. So I didn't set out to write a memoir. I didn't set out to write a book like that until I got that email wasn't even on my radar.
Okay.
So once she kind of made that call or that introduction, I kind of started to think, okay, if I did write a book, just hypothetically, like what would it be about? So the psychosis was obviously like at the forefront of my mind. I mean, it's the biggest thing in many ways that has ever happened to me.
Yeah.
But I still wasn't quite sure, like, what will that look like? Do I want to put that out there?
Yeah.
That's also a question to have. So I definitely wrestled with a lot. But once I sat down and started to actually like work on a proposal, I was like, this is what I want to do. From there, it just kind of like all spilled out for better or for worse.
You craft it so well too. You take various things, you have journal entries, the journal from when you were going through postpartum psychosis, medical records, past experiences. It's not necessarily chronological. I mean, it still sort of is, but you go back and forth a lot. So how did you come to decide on that formatting? I mean, it works so well. How do you even think to do that?
Thank you. Something that I realized as I was looking at my life and looking at kind of my book proposal template was that like all of the things that led me to psychosis, the story was kind of woven together in a way that I didn't expect it to be.
Hmm.
Like in the book, I talk about like growing up in a very Pentecostal home and like longing to hear the voice of God, and then kind of contrast that against psychosis, where I was suddenly hearing God all the time. So I kind of found those parallels of like, oh, like these things that happened to me in psychosis kind of call back to other things that I've experienced and lived through. So from there, I kind of was like, okay, like I don't necessarily want to just tell a book where it's like this happened and then this happened and then that happened. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I was like, maybe it'd be more interesting if we changed it up a little bit.
Yeah.
So my editor was phenomenal with that because I feel like in early drafts of the book, it was honestly kind of confusing, all of the time jumps. So I kind of had to like rein it in a little bit, do it in a way that like wasn't overindulgent, for lack of a better word.
Okay, yeah, sure. So you credit your editor a bit. And did you have like a writing coach or a person that you turned to help you craft memoir specifically? Or were you able to just kind of lean into your own work ethic and just kind of write? I mean, you've been writing for a long time.
Yeah. So yes, I did work with an author who'd written her own memoir in the sense of like I was already writing the book and wanted feedback from someone. But the interesting thing about that process was that the feedback that I needed, I feel like, was like validation that I was an okay writer or a good writer and that the book was going to be not terrible. She even told me, she's like, because I was like, I will pay you to teach me how to write better. And she said, Anna, you don't need me. And I was
Yeah.
like, wait a minute, like, that's crazy. I definitely do need you. But so we worked together a little bit, and she kind of gave me feedback on narrative and my use of past and present tense and all of that. So I worked with her for a couple of chapters, but overall, I think that what was the biggest struggle was like my level of confidence in the work and kind of finding it in me to be proud of what I was doing.
How do you think that you finally did that then? How did you turn off that critical eye, or did you just write through it?
Yeah, fake it till you make it. I mean, even now, I still struggle. Like I cut myself off from looking at reviews, but when
Yeah.
I was looking at reviews, I'd get in my head about what people did and didn't like and all of that. So like for me, it's like a constant battle. But as far as writing the book, I just had to, I literally had to tell myself like, okay, I've got a contract with a publisher. I've got to put the book together and it has to be something that I'm at least a little bit proud of. Regardless of whether or not I think that I'm good at this, like I have to at least try.
Yeah.
So that was weirdly helpful to me.
Did your husband read it or various drafts of it? Was
He
that
did,
helpful,
yes.
or were you like, no, you love me. You have to tell me I'm a good writer?
Well, so I did have him read it very early on, mainly because, I mean, as you know, having read the book, I do talk about him a fair amount.
Yeah.
He is a more private person compared to me, and I didn't want to include anything or look at any like anecdotes or scenarios that he would have felt uncomfortable sharing with the world. So I first presented to him as kind of like a, oh, like this is what I've got. Like let me know if I need to cut anything. And he was fine. He didn't want me to cut anything. But yes, he read it when it was not very much of anything and gave me feedback, which I appreciated.
It's interesting, right? Our truths coincide with other people's experiences and truths too. And I think
Yeah.
that's always a big question I have with some of the memoirs that I read. I'm like, ooh, did this person know you were going to say this? I didn't really have that in yours.
Yeah, I always have the same thought too. And I feel like even now, like I'm so nervous for my parents to read it. And it's not like I say anything bad, but it's just like it's easier for me to put myself out there to strangers than it is to the people closest to me. You know, I'm
Yeah.
like, what are they going to think? People who actually lived through this with me, like, how are they going to, like, what are their thoughts on my retelling of it?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Is this the in most detail that you've ever shared your experience? Are there going to be things about what you were feeling and thinking that will surprise your parents or the people closest to you?
Yeah, even my husband, who I think thought that he knew all of it, there was a decent amount of material that I had honestly blocked out.
Yeah.
And it was only going through my journals from the hospital and the hospital records that I kind of had moments of like, oh yeah, that did happen. And that
Yeah.
was weird.
Yeah.
So
Well, let's talk about that. Going through this difficult thing that you talked about, blocking out and not necessarily remembering, which I feel like is something that a brain would do to protect itself after psychosis, right?
there are gaps, but I
Okay.
would say that I do remember a lot of what happened. Now, determining what was reality and what
Right.
was delusional or like, delusion was very difficult for me as I tried to piece it back together, but I do have like, memories of the time.
When you think back to that experience, are you in it yourself or do you almost watch a different version of you living that life?
Depends on the day and how I'm coping.
Uh-huh.
I
Yeah.
think that writing through it, I definitely had moments where I had to just kind of pretend almost like I mean to dissociate and pretend like it was happening to someone else just
Yeah.
because. It is traumatic and it is difficult. And when I really sit down and think about a lot of the things that I shared, it makes me really sad.
Yeah.
So I think that I did in some ways like have to remove myself from the situation. I don't know that it was always a healthy approach, but it was kind of what I did what I needed to do.
Sure. And then, so was there anything that worked for you that could help you kind of click in and out? Because you're a mom of two, you're an online presence, you're a writer. You had to live your life simultaneously. You're probably having to like, I don't know, pick up lots of toys and clean up spills while also going to this trickier space to live in to write your book. How did you live those two lives simultaneously?
It's a very good question. My book deal was finalized 6 days after my son was born. So I
Okay. Wow, you
was
were
kind
really in
of
it.
I was in it. I don't know. I mean, I think that I just had the deadline in my mind and I kind of treated it like any other project. I kind of set goals and said, okay, I've got to meet this deadline. Like I have to have the book done by April. There's no world where I mean, you can obviously ask for extensions and all of that, but given my personality, that's just not what I was going to do.
Yeah.
So I think that there are some days that I wrote literally one-handed, holding my baby in one hand and just like click clacking with the other. I think having a supportive partner definitely helped. My husband did a lot of the childcare on weekends and nights so that I could, go to my favorite coffee shop and just knock out a few paragraphs.
I love that.
So yeah, I think I did it mainly because I had to. I'm not quite sure, not quite sure the mechanics, but I had no choice. So it's like I've got to get this done.
Yeah, it is honestly incredible what we are capable of when we really just
Yes.
have no other choice and
Yeah.
you just don't have time to like think about it. Okay, so talk to me about finding the title.
So that's an always an interesting question because that was from my publisher.
Okay.
I had the process that every author goes through where you present your titles, in the proposals. And they liked one and like were kind of like on board with it, but then after they took it to their whole like marketing and sales team, they were like, "What about Missing Me?" And I was kind of like, "Okay."
Yeah.
I felt like it really did fit the book better than anything that I could have come up with.
Okay.
So I was really happy with it.
Did you have a working title while you were writing, something that inspired you or unlocked the creativity, or was it just like my memoir? Here we
I
go.
think that so we had the title the original title that I submitted in my proposal was While We're Here.
Okay.
And I did connect with that and I did with the help of my agent come up with that, but I think that once I heard Missing Me, I was like, okay, yeah, this fits. This is it.
Yeah, but I could see how While We're Here would be creatively inspiring. Like that's a
Yes,
good
for sure.
title too, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, and then did you have any hand in designing the cover? I love the cover. It's also the same colors. My podcast colors are pink, blue, and yellow. So I
I
felt like
love that. I gave direction in the like sense of sharing covers that I'd seen online and liked, things that I didn't want. My only thing that I didn't want was I didn't want a picture of me on the cover.
okay.
So like, you guys can do whatever else makes sense or whatever else, you want to do, but I do not want a picture of me on the cover. So I gave them like very minimal direction and their art team came back with that, which I thought was fabulous.
Why didn't you want your picture on the cover?
I just, I feel like I have books where the author's on the cover and I love that for them, but it just
Yeah. Just
couldn't be me.
it wasn't right for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's get into your memoir. Reading your memoir, it feels like you put a lot of pressure on yourself throughout your life to look a certain way, pressures to be thin, what you write about, to be a certain way in your good wife area and daughter, right? Your father was a pastor as well.
Yes.
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 So, right, good wife, good daughter, good Christian. Act a certain way, your social interactions, where you talk about not wanting to get too tipsy and feel out of control. Pressures that I have felt many times in various degrees throughout my life. Where do you think that those pressures came from?
I think that I have just always been very self-critical for better or for worse.
Okay.
Even now, I struggle with compliments. If someone tells me that they like the book, I think, oh God, they feel bad for me because this terrible thing happened.
No.
That's why they're saying that. And then if someone told me they hated the book, I'd be like, all right, I believe that. No,
Why
but
do we do that? Why do we do
it's
that?
so
Yeah.
funny. I mean, I feel like I've gotten better over the years, but
Yeah.
I have been always been very perfectionist, very like wanting to be perceived in the way that I want to be perceived. I
Mm.
think that part of that is because I did struggle a lot with anxiety growing up. And I think that because that was out of my control, I was like, okay, how I present myself and how I am, perceived in the world is in my control, which it isn't, but it felt like felt like at the time that I was like, okay, this is one thing that I do have that I can kind of own.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a pattern or, a behavior that started very young.
This is from one of your journal entries. You write, I've wasted 27 years desperately trying to shrink into spaces that weren't meant for me. You said it seems like it continues to be a battle a little bit, like it always will be. But what was that moment like for you when you realized that maybe this was something that you needed to pivot from, didn't want to do anymore, recognize that you were doing, and could kind of break free from?
Funnily enough, I think that the psychotic episode helped in a very weird way with some of that.
Yeah.
I felt uninhibited, truly, like without a care in the world for the first time in my life. I didn't care what people thought of me. I didn't care how I looked or how I sounded or any of these things that had plagued me my entire life. So I felt free. I said whatever I wanted. I talk about in the book. I cursed up a storm, which I would have never, never in public say the F word. Like I would,
Yeah.
things like that, that I just had all these rules for myself that I'd built up over the years that like
Yeah.
were gone. So when I recovered from the psychosis, as I was recovering, I think that I then had to reckon with like who I was, you know what I mean? Like what did I want? What did I learn about myself through this terrible experience that I wanted to carry with me, that I wanted to keep? Like what lessons were actually, not that, I mean, not as, wild as they may have seemed. So I think that that was a part of that. I think that I craved that feeling, the carefreeness of it all. Easier said than done to
Sure.
actually live that way, but
Yeah.
it was a really interesting experience.
Are there ways now that you try to model for your children, letting go of the perfectionism?
Yeah, I think that it's hard because my daughter is 5, and I feel like one of my friends once joked, like, you can be a bad parent until they're 4 and they start to understand the world. It's just
Why
not
does that?
true. Not
Well,
true. But to some
true.
extent, when you
Yeah.
think about like the things that you say and do, like when
Yeah.
they're little, like my son is a year and a half, like I don't have to worry about the words that I'm using to describe the situation around him to the extent that I do with my 5-year-old.
Yes.
So, I mean, I think that I have had to let go of a little bit of that just for the sake of practicing what I preach. So, like I stopped looking at reviews. That's one thing that I did do
Yeah.
because I was like so in my head about it and so honestly insufferable about all of these thoughts that I had about what people were saying. And I kind of had a moment where I was like, okay, I can't unwrite the book. This review does nothing for me because there's no lesson that I can really learn from this.
Yeah.
If they didn't like this chapter, didn't like how I phrased that, like, what am I going to do with that?
Yeah.
So I think that not looking at reviews is one big thing that helped me kind of as I talk to my daughter about like showing herself grace and, she's in kindergarten, so she's dealing with like, this person doesn't want to be my friend and
Yeah.
all of these things. I think that I kind of had to let go of like needing to know everything that people were saying about me to kind of like be honest with her about like, yeah, like sometimes people might not want to be your friend and that's okay rather than, again, me spiraling at a 3-star review.
It's crazy how kids can hold up a mirror. I have a 7-year-old, she's in first grade,
Mhm.
and she's also forced me to confront the things within myself that I want to try my best, to keep her from
Right.
experiencing, and we'll get into more silver linings. And one of them I know for you was your battle with equaling thinness to goodness. And like one thing that I told my husband years ago was, I don't want to weigh myself. I don't want to talk about my weight in front of my child. I don't want her to weigh her. I don't want her to associate any type of value with the number on the scale, any
Yeah.
good or bad, because
Yeah.
it goes from good to bad real fast. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we'll get to more of those silver linings for you, but let's talk about some of these pressures a little bit. Religion. You talked about growing up in a Pentecostal household. You talk about God's love and being lovable. And you talk about being in this church. So I grew up Catholic. So it was very
Mhm.
interesting reading your experience. Obviously, in the Catholic text and in the tradition, there are times when God comes to people and says things, right? I mean, in
Yeah.
the Bible, it says that. But you were really conditioned to believe that if you were good enough or righteous enough or worthy enough, that God would talk to you, God would heal you without you needing any sort of like outside help. Talk to me about feeling that and living in that weird place of like, this is what I think God's love looks like, but I'm not necessarily experiencing it, right? Like God wasn't talking to you. You didn't feel like you were getting healed out of your dark thoughts. So how did you live through that time in your life?
I think that it was all that I knew. So I think that helped, honestly. Um, something that I appreciate about Pentecostalism, even though I am like way far away from that now, was that God was always very close and very tangible and cared about our day to day and was just very present. It was a really comforting thought. I
Yeah.
think that when it came to me, especially not getting healed from my mental health conditions, I dealt with a lot of guilt, honestly. I felt like there was something that I was doing wrong that was causing this thing to not happen for me. So that was a struggle for sure. And like as you mentioned, and I talk about in the book, like God not talking to me and not feeling spiritual enough or holy enough and all of these things. I feel like it was just like a constant battle. And it honestly didn't end for me until I was in like my 20s, I would say, that I fully let go of this idea of what God was or what I'd always thought God was.
And what maybe his love looked like or felt
Yes.
like. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. You write about your parents, and they seem to have such a beautiful, the open door policy. It seems like they made you feel loved and valued as best that they could, given the information that they had.
Yes.
And you do see a therapist, but she's a religious therapist. And so you talk about this moment. I mean, I got goosebumps when you were like, if I had gone to a secular therapist when I was younger, like what would have changed? What would have been
Yeah.
different? How has it been kind of re-examining these questions for you, knowing that you'll never really have that answer and you have to sort of move forward?
When I look back at that time of my life, my counselor, my therapist served an important purpose in the time that she was in my life. I think that I try not to get caught up in but I needed medication and she never suggested that. And that could have saved me a hospitalization. I try to not end up in that thought spiral. I mean, it's just like anything, you get caught up in the what ifs of what if I done this? What if I done that? What if life had treated me differently in this way? So, I mean, I think that I kind of just had to accept it. Like, okay, this sucked, but, maybe my hospitalization brought me to the psychiatrist that I needed, which I believe that it did, or
Yeah.
gave me the resources that I wouldn't have had any other way. So, I mean, maybe in the end, like, was always supposed to experience that hospitalization. Like, when you look at the universe and fate and all of that, like, maybe that was how the story was going to play out, regardless.
Yeah.
But I don't see a religious counselor now. I wouldn't send my child to a religious counselor. So I think that my thought process about it all has definitely changed even as I've like made peace with more of it.
What I appreciated about you bringing this up, because I agree, I don't think you can play the what if game. We're where we are now, and if we're doing okay, then like, life had to happen a certain way for us to get
Yeah.
here. But I think that it can be helpful for people who maybe have a child who's going through something that you write about going through, or even a young person who just might need that extra push to realize like, oh, I can't pray this away. Or,
Yeah,
oh, it doesn't mean I'm a bad person if I need medication. Because I think there's still a lot of stigma with that. And it's a
for
dangerous
sure.
stigma.
Yes. I mean, yeah, it is still, I mean, I feel like it's gotten better. I feel like there are more conversations happening than there were 20 years ago when I
And your
first started to
memoir
struggle.
adds to that conversation in a
Thank you.
beautiful way. It really
Thank
does.
you. Yeah. There's still work to be done, but I am encouraged by the shifts that I've seen, just even in like the people that I know. I feel like people are so much more open to therapy and medication than they once were, which is a really beautiful thing.
Yeah, yeah. I think it takes women like you being open about their stories and just inviting other people to witness your experience, even if they haven't gone through something themselves. It makes all of our compassion and empathy grow, which is all we can hope for these
Yeah.
days, I think. So you talked about how you would not send your children to a spiritual counselor now. You write this. It's every parent's worst fear. You will do anything to keep your child safe, but how do you protect them from themselves? You were experiencing self harm. Your parents were trying their best to help you in the ways that they could, like I said. Having gone through your own experience, do you have a plan? Do you have ideas of how you could navigate if something similar happened to one of your children? Because I think that as a parent myself, it's one of like my biggest fears is like not being able to help them or even like your parent, it's just reading the compassion that they had towards you, the open door policy, and you still didn't feel 100% comfortable sharing. So how do we do it? Ayana, how do we
Yeah.
do it?
Here are all the answers.
Yes,
No,
please.
I
I
wish.
need them from you.
I wish. I think that one thing that I do plan to do as my daughter gets older is talk about my story with her in an age appropriate way. I'm not going to give her all the gory details about being hospitalized, but to talk about therapy and to talk about mental health and to talk about all of these things in a way that is, neutral but positive, not trying to sway her one way or another or put a diagnosis on her, but to let her know that these resources exist.
Yeah.
So I think that that is something that I hope to do. And then, I mean, honestly, one of the big things that I feel like, at least with my parents, who again are incredible, and I cannot say enough good things about them, but I feel like they did not realize like the impact of me having a phone and talking to people and like
Mm.
all, which I don't even get into in a lot of this in the book, but like being able to access some of the resources that I accessed as far as self-harm and how to self-harm and eating
Yeah.
disorders and
Yeah.
how to starve yourself. So I think that our parents just didn't know that the internet could be like a bad place. And so I think having lived through that, I plan to be like a little bit overbearing, for lack of a better word, when it comes to like what she is consuming.
Yeah.
I mean,
Good
you
for
can only do
you.
so much. You can only do
Yeah.
so much, but
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know.
I know. I think you're right, though. I think there is something to like those. Our parents didn't even know to have that conversation because they
Yeah,
didn't realize what existed. We know what exists. So we
yeah,
know to at least have that conversation.
for sure.
So you write about being a Black woman in America. The Kira story, that made me so upset on your behalf. That was so annoying. How old were you at this? You had gone to a new school
Yeah, I was in kindergarten. Yeah,
and you were the one Black girl in your
yeah,
school. And they were like, can we just call you Kira because that was what the last Black girl was called?
yeah,
What the absolute. I know that this is probably naivety on my part, but like kindergarteners already kind of like viewing the
yeah,
world from that point of view is so, so disheartening.
yeah,
But I really appreciated the information that you gave us about especially the maternal health system for Black women and how it's a way more dangerous situation for Black women to give birth in our country in a way that just feels very archaic.
yeah,
Going through that experience, you write about when you realize that if Serena Williams wasn't listened to and she's like an upper echelon celebrity athlete, what hope was there for you if you had a concern during your pregnancy or during your birth? And just to give listeners a little background on the Serena Williams story, shortly after giving birth to her daughter Olympia via emergency C-section in 2017, Serena Williams suffered a pulmonary embolism, a blood clot blocking an artery in her lungs. And this was a condition that she had experienced before and immediately recognized. When she found a nurse and specifically requested a CT scan, the nurse dismissed her, suggesting that her pain medication was making her talk crazy. Serena later wrote that no one was really listening to what she was saying, and it was only through persistent self-advocacy that doctors eventually ran the tests, confirmed the clots, and finally began proper treatment.
yeah. It was honestly very scary, especially because with the birth of my daughter, because it was during the height of the pandemic, I wasn't allowed any support people other than my husband. So I'd planned, and I'd cover this in the book, but I'd planned to have a doula. I kind of had this birth plan. It didn't end up being what I'd always envisioned, like at all. So I did go in thinking, like, if there are complications, will my husband be able to advocate for me? And I think that even looking back at my birth with my daughter, which ended in an emergency C-section, if I'd had a doula there, someone who kind of could ask the tough questions rather than just nodding along when the doctor said things, I
Yeah,
think that that situation would have been a lot less traumatic for me.
yeah.
So, but I mean, as I say, like, I mean, as a Black woman, if you make it out alive, that is the goal. So, I mean, I look at my story and I think, okay, this could have been different. This could have been different. But like, I'm like, I survived. Like, that is really what matters.
You survived and your children survived.
Yeah.
There's no way to know if someone will experience postpartum psychosis, but it feels like throughout your book, you're planting these little seeds. While I was a perfectionist, while I felt anxiety, while I had depression that went unchecked for a while or wasn't helped, while I was a Black woman going through this difficult experience with anxiety on top of that because of statistically what I had seen play out in the maternal health world, do you feel like that's what you were trying to do? Not say, hey guys, if you experience experience all of these things, you too will have postpartum psychosis. But it was kind of like, maybe this was why, maybe this was why. But truly, we never really know what the triggers are.
I think there are risk factors, but none of it is like you would know, from
Yeah,
the start, I'm going to have postpartum psychosis. I
right.
think that for me, I had a big fear throughout the book, honestly, that like if I didn't tie it all together, people would be like, why am I reading about her life? When, when the cover says memoir about postpartum psychosis. So honestly, that was like a challenge for me, but a good one. I think that I wanted to tell a cohesive story. So I tried to find ways to bring it back. Because after the psychosis, looking back, I wanted to fix it. I wanted to have an exact explanation of what should have gone differently in my life, of
Mm.
how I should have behaved that would have, prevented it from being as bad as it was. And I couldn't find those answers. So I think I kind of try to take the reader along on that journey with me of like trying, grasping at straws almost and
Yeah.
coming up with nothing.
Well, it's a very human thing to do, right? To try to rationalize, try to explain, try to figure out why. But I think we also just have to say, like, you could, in theory, have a quote unquote perfect life and you could still experience postpartum
Yes.
psychosis. It's just one of
Yes.
those things that happens. You write it occurs in 1 to 2 of 1,000 births, which is not a small number when you think of the
Right.
amount of births. And when left untreated, 4% of women will harm or kill their infant.
Yeah.
I've had 2 children. I didn't experience postpartum psychosis, but I experienced insane postpartum OCD for like 5 days after the birth of my son, to
Mhm.
where like I literally thought my husband and daughter were going to die every time they left the house. I started to track them. It was horrible. And so I'm working on getting financing for a short film about that right now. And so I've talked to a lot of postpartum health mental counselors to kind of make sure that we're capturing that just right, because it feels like there's still a lot of shame associated with this thing that is very, very much out of our control. It's hormones, it's chemistry. And I really appreciated, and this may be a hot take, but like when you brought up Andrea Yates and these women who we now, like, yes, did they do a monstrous thing? But we now know it's because they were suffering from something where if someone had just paid attention or done something a little differently, maybe something could have changed and lives could have been saved. And I think when we go through life pretending that these bad things don't happen to people, that postpartum psychosis doesn't exist, we are setting up a system that will continue to fail babies and women and families.
Yeah.
And that's also what I just really appreciated about your memoir. You're just like, this happens. This happens. And thank God I had such a support system, but I could have easily not. And it
Yeah.
could have really been terrible.
So I never had a voice telling me to kill my, if anything, it was interesting. I thought that the people around me were going to kill her. If anything, I was not I don't know what the word is. I was told, I was thinking, whatever, to harm the people trying to harm her. So like
Yeah.
all of these people around me, like my husband's family, my family, distant relatives, people I hadn't seen in years, like they're all going to be trying to kill her. But I mean, the delusions shift all the time, and I have no way of knowing how, if I'd been home for longer, what voices I would have heard. I have
Yeah.
no idea if being closer in proximity to my daughter would have led to me having more delusions centered on her.
Yeah.
So I think that it's a very sobering thought. I was reading a book recently about postpartum psychosis, and they talk about a woman who thankfully recovered, but she had a delusion that her house was on fire and there were firefighters. She's on the second story of her house. There are firefighters in her backyard on the first floor asking her to throw her baby down to save the baby from the burning house.
Yeah.
And so thankfully she got treatment in time and she was taken to the hospital. But it's like if that had happened and if she had hurt or killed her baby, then of course in the headlines she is a monster. What kind of mother could do this?
Yeah.
But then when you actually look at the specifics and how this disorder works and what it does to your brain, then it starts to make more sense that you're kind of like, okay, this truly just warps your perception of everything,
It's a
And you
psychosis.
might
It's a
be,
break from reality, from
yeah. Yeah, and your motherly instinct or whatever you want to
yeah.
call it may still be there. It just presents in a very different, sometimes dangerous way.
Right, right. The one thing that this postpartum mental health woman said that really just clicked everything for me was when a woman is going through postpartum depression or OCD, because OCD is when you have these intrusive thoughts, right?
Right.
And and the woman recognizes that it's wrong. That is not psychosis. What happens in psychosis is when a woman does not recognize that that thought is not realistic or wrong, just like the experience that you just shared. That mother thought her house was on fire and and she was doing the right thing, saving her baby potentially had
Right.
she, gone through that. And so I think that there's just so much damage that we do to women who suffer from postpartum psychosis. And I think that your memoir shines such a light on the experience in a way where, like I said, I think it can just continue a lot of conversations and start a lot of conversations that need to happen. Because if people are aware of it and they know what to look for, then the women can get the help that they deserve. But until we start talking about it, I mean, I don't know about you. When I was pregnant, and I love this part where you talked about how you would live your life in like worst case scenario because you were convinced that if you thought of all the ways that things could go wrong, then you could keep them from going wrong. And I totally, totally relate. I think that stuff all the time still. Actually, I need to like chill out on it because I need to like think, oh, life is good. Good things will happen.
Yes, same.
But it's this really interesting thing where when women are pregnant, there's not a lot of talk about what can go wrong as soon as the baby is here. Mental health wise, yes, but also physically. I had 3 days after my daughter was born, I was back in the emergency room because I was having heart palpitations and I couldn't breathe. It was like a whole thing. I had a physical situation happening.
Hmm.
And at one point, the ER doctor came to me and said, okay, well, we can rule out postpartum cardiomyopathy. And I thought, what the hell is that? Oh, it's when your heart doubles in size after the birth
Yeah.
of your child, and you can literally die of a heart attack. And it's like, I understand why we're not inundated with all this information because it can be really scary. But it also feels like, well, the flip side of that is not keeping all the information from us, you
Right.
know?
Yeah, and it's hard. I mean, I'm someone who worries and like am always, as you mentioned, on the lookout for the worst thing that could happen. But I think that for me, when I look back at my experience, if I had known or if someone around me had known that postpartum psychosis presents with, mood swings, insomnia, I can't remember all of the symptoms off the top of my head, but irritability, all of these things that were happening, like textbook postpartum psychosis, I think that we would have caught it earlier. Now, would that have changed anything? It's hard to say.
Right.
I've talked to people who experienced postpartum psychosis who were only hospitalized for a couple of days. So I mean, maybe I can't say. Would my story have ended differently if I hadn't gotten so far and been so far gone before I was hospitalized? Yeah, it's like, yeah, I wish that I'd at least known that. Maybe if I just like you mentioned with the heart condition, like maybe if we just like sprinkle a few symptoms to look out for,
Yeah.
then we'll help parents out. I don't know.
Especially if it's your first child, you don't know what is something that's concerning and what's something that is like quote unquote normal, right? Like
Yeah.
insomnia. It's like, well, of course, I'm up all the I mean, and you write that in your memoir. You're like, it was your psychiatrist at the time who kind of told your husband
Yes, my
this
psychiatrist.
this is something that if it escalates, like basically we need to pay attention to
Yeah.
this. And thank God. At what point would your husband have realized that there was something wrong?
I think that I would have ended up in the hospital either way that day because I was shouting prophecies from God
That's
that I
true.
was
That's
getting.
true. And that was very different for you. That
Yeah,
wasn't
not my norm. So he was very like, what is going on? But yeah, I mean, my psychiatrist told us which hospital to go to. Again, speaking of my support system, called the doctor at the psychiatrist on staff at this hospital to say, hey, my patient is coming in. These are
Yeah.
the symptoms. Basically, like keep me posted, take care of her. So I was immensely lucky in a lot of ways.
Ugh. Let's talk a little bit more about postpartum psychosis. You can give a little brief overview because obviously we want everyone to pick up your book and they really, really should. What was your experience like?
I was really worried about postpartum depression after giving birth because I'd had a history of depressive episodes. And instead, I felt amazing. I felt like I remember thinking, like, why did anyone tell me that? And I don't know if I said this in the book or not, but like, why did anyone tell me how good I was going to feel? Like,
Yeah.
I think I put on my Instagram story a picture of my husband and I was like, let's have 10 more babies. And so people are just like laughing at this stuff because whatever, but like I was serious. I was like, I feel incredible. Like birth has activated something within me.
Yeah.
But then my mood started swinging and I was really down and then I was really up and then I was irritable and I was mad, then I was really funny. That was something that, I don't think I really cover much in the book, but I was kind of like the life of the party. Like I was a jokester. I was making people laugh all the time. I was full of funny stories. I couldn't get my words out fast enough. I was in the group chats, like lighting up the group chats. Like I was doing great. So I have all of this going on. And my husband and doula started to pick up before like things got bad or got even weird. Both started to notice, like, Hannah's not sleeping. Like, she hasn't been sleeping. So they kind of looking at it back, like hindsight being 2020, they almost knew that something could be happening before anyone else did.
Hmm.
But it took a turn toward me feeling distrustful of anyone else being around my daughter. It all happened very quickly. I was hospitalized 10 days after I gave birth.
Right.
The distrust probably started around day 6 or day 7. Once I started to feel paranoia about my husband and my mother and like all of these relatives, it snowballed, like it escalated very quickly. And then within a couple of days, I was hearing from God.
And what was God telling you?
A whole lot.
Yeah. One
I
being that you will write a book one day.
Yeah. So yes, that is something that I cover. It's very like meta and weird to think about, but
Yeah.
the first prophecy that I heard from God was that I was going to write a book. After I was out of psychosis, I was like, that was so weird. Like, why did I think that? That's so embarrassing. And then I have a book. So life came full circle in a very strange way. I heard that I was a special prophet, that I was going to rewrite the Bible. I heard stories about my friends, like things, secrets that my friends had, they hadn't told me. I believed that my daughter was the second coming of Jesus. She was supernatural, that she was immortal. Like it was just all over the place. It was very out there.
And what did God's voice sound like?
No one's ever asked me that question. I think it felt so familiar. I mean, given that now I know or can say that it was my own kind of delusional thoughts, it makes sense that it felt so close because it was me.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was just kind of like I felt it in my body. Like I would get
Yeah.
these words and they'd appear in my head and it was just felt so real. It was unlike anything I've ever experienced.
And we talked a little bit about silver linings or maybe surprising good things that came out of this. And so one of them that we talked about earlier was your feeling of freedom and a peace in being uninhibited for the first time in your life.
Yeah.
And then you also write this chapter called Pretty Prophet. I resonated with so much. You're told that being a woman looks and is a certain way. And when you don't feel like you fit that mold, what does that mean about you, right? And so talk to me a little bit about that silver lining and the other little ones that maybe popped up in retrospect.
Yeah, I think that I alternated between wanting nothing to do with the experience. After I got out of the hospital, I was back at work within 2 or 3 weeks of my release. Threw myself into work, was busier than ever, like barely had time to sleep until I crashed, as one does when you are uprooting like that.
Yeah.
So I think I resented the whole experience. But, my husband actually said a lot of what you were saying was nonsensical and disturbing and upsetting, but some of it was true. It's like, I had that thought too. Like some of the things that I was saying, some of the revelations that I was having about my life and my decisions and other people, and like reading the journals, I'm like, there are elements of truth to this.
Yeah.
So I think that I'm not an everything happens for a reason person, but I did think, okay, if this did happen and it's such a big part of me now, like what, if anything, can I learn from it? And so I think the big one was that I'm not in control. I'm still struggling to accept that, but yeah, like
Yeah.
I am not in control. I'm nowhere near in control. None of us are. This could happen. Psychosis can happen really to anyone.
Yeah. Right. It's not just a postpartum condition.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, it can be drug induced. It can be induced by, insomnia. It can be induced by all these things. But yeah, anyone can experience psychosis. So I think that learning that I wasn't in control was like a big one. And then also, I think that as you mentioned, had placed such an emphasis on my appearance and my social know-how that I just kind of had to let go of that. I think that I looked back at the psychosis and I did so many embarrassing things and I, wasn't showering and I was like behaving very strangely and it was all my worst nightmare basically. And I'm kind of like, okay, like I kind of had to let go. I let go of that completely in psychosis.
Hmm.
And now I have to reckon with the fact that I did let go of that and like the world didn't end.
Yeah.
I did embarrass myself. I was saying cringeworthy things, but like the earth is still spinning.
Yeah.
So it's almost like exposure therapy in a way. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. Was there a letting go of blame or an internalized shame or anything else that you've had to work through since being on the other side of the psychosis?
I definitely think that even now I can still find myself in that hole if I dig enough.
Yeah.
I think that I felt so conflicted because I dealt with anxiety and it was terrible and it was difficult and I dealt with depression. But all of those things felt like things that like happened solely to me and that I had some say over, even though I didn't. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
I felt like I could hide those things. And I did do that very well. I could mask how I was actually feeling. in psychosis, you don't have that luxury, and you're kind of like everything is revealed to everyone, and you don't have much of a say over how you're behaving. So I think that I struggled with the idea of psychosis because and I cover this, but I'd always thought that I was like this mental health advocate, but I also had like this asterisk of like, okay, as long as I don't have one of the scary conditions, you know what I mean? As long as I've just got depression and anxiety, like we're good. I can talk about mental health.
Yeah.
So I had to reckon with both the way that I behaved and my attitude toward it, and realizing that I kind of had like a little bit of a problematic outlook on mental health conditions that were more stigmatized. And I hadn't realized that until I actually developed one.
Yeah, yeah. But would you say that you don't feel any blame or shame for having gone through this experience?
I would say now, I think that's fair to say. I think that I still do have some embarrassment that I think will always be there just because I embarrassed myself, you know? So it's normal to feel embarrassed when you've acted embarrassingly. But I think that I've made a lot of peace with like everything else. And I am like in a generally a good place with it now.
Good. You and your husband make the decision to have another baby.
Yes.
And you write about how you knew that it was a possibility that you would go
Yeah.
experience psychosis again. So, in what ways were you able to navigate that decision together?
I think the biggest hurdle, honestly, was me emotionally. I was so scared about what was going to happen. And after I found out I was pregnant with my son, I had the thought of like, why am I doing like I could be completely just like wreaking havoc on my life right now by doing this, you know?
Yeah.
At that point, my daughter was 3 years old. We were in a rhythm. She was potty trained. So that was something I was like, oh God, I gotta do that again. But I had all these fears about like this could go wrong, and it'd be even worse for me because one, my daughter's old enough that she would know that I was gone if I went to the hospital, and two, I would feel even more emotion toward the whole thing if I'd lived through this and I had to live through it again, you know, I think I
Yeah.
would have felt like what's going on? Like lightning
Yeah.
has struck twice. So I mean, we took practical steps like hiring a night doula. My psychiatrist was like very mindful of my medication and the medications that she thought would be best for me immediately postpartum. In the hospital after I'm giving birth, she was like adjusting my medication, immediately putting me on higher doses of certain things and all of that. So I had, you know, the medical help, but I think that the biggest thing was just having to, again, relinquish control.
Yeah.
Had to accept, you know, this could happen again. There's a decent recurrence rate for postpartum psychosis sufferers for it to happen in subsequent pregnancies. So I just had to kind of accept that we're going to do this and we're just going to see how it goes.
Yeah. Were you still able to breastfeed your children, or was that something that you were trying to navigate with medication? You know, it's a tricky thing but I think women battle it because they feel
Yeah.
like, well, I should be breastfeeding my kid. Well, it's like, not if you need to take medication so that you feel okay.
Yeah, with my daughter, so the birth that ended in the psychosis, I breastfed for a matter of days before my psychiatrist, once she was involved, said, you know, I think that was something else that I don't know that I mentioned in the book, that she was trying to prescribe medication for me from afar. So it's, you know, peak COVID, so she can't meet with me. So she's sending medication to my pharmacy saying, okay, take the big thing was getting me to sleep. Like, please, can she have like a good night's sleep? And it wasn't working.
Hmm.
So she was trying all these medications, and she basically was like, I think that it would be best if you did not breastfeed because there is a lot going on right now. And I struggled with that. I think for years, honestly, that I felt jealous when people would post about their breastfeeding journeys and
Yeah.
just kind of had a feeling, honestly, of like, why is pregnancy and childbirth and postpartum so easy for some people and not
Yeah.
me? Like every part of it has been grueling. But with my son, I didn't even try to breastfeed. I dried up my milk the second it came in,
Okay.
and that was a really freeing decision for me. I would have been able to breastfeed on the medication, but it just would have been like, I just was like, I love formula. Like I did it with my daughter. It's fine.
Yeah.
Like,
You made
let's
the
just
best
let's
decision for
just go
you.
for it. Let's
Yeah.
just go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that that's fantastic. Okay, so let's talk about where you are now. You write there's room in the aftermath for joy. So, how are you finding joy in the aftermath?
I think that I have such an appreciation now for the mundane, for the day to day, for my mind, honestly.
Mm,
I feel very grateful that I kind of have my wits about me and am able to live the life that I want to live. And I'm happy. I'm genuinely happy. And I think that a part of that comes from me lowering my standards a little bit because I'm like, things could be so much worse, like so much worse.
Yeah.
Not experiencing, so I should have included this when we were talking earlier about my second birth. I did not experience psychosis with him. So that was like a very redemptive experience as well. And I think that I was like, okay, this still isn't the postpartum that some people get because I'm still looking over my shoulder for, insomnia or
Yeah.
delusion or a mood swing.
Yeah.
But it is good. Like this is good. And I'm getting to spend time with my family and my baby and to just soak it up. And so that was an experience for me that was really, really powerful, honestly, and that I kind of hold close.
Yeah. Before I let you go, I have two questions for you. I have one that I ask all authors, and then I have this question jar thing that I've started.
Okay.
The one question that I ask is, how do you stay hopeful today?
I think that I stay hopeful by, and this is so cliche, but it really is looking at the little things. Like sometimes I just have to throw my phone across the room. Like literally, I just have to like chuck it across the room and turn off the TV and just like sit and think. My phone background is actually a piece of art that says, "In another universe, I'm dreaming of this life right here." And that's kind of like what I have thought, I have maybe not the life I'd always envisioned, but I have this like really special, beautiful life and this really amazing family and amazing friends and like things are good. So like I'm not always hopeful about the state of the world, obviously, but in general, I feel like being in like community, getting together with my friends or going on a date with my husband, like these silly little things help me remember like the good, that there is good.
I think that's beautiful. And I agree. When the world feels like everything's crumbling down, I do. I look to my left, I look to my right, and I think, okay, there's still beauty,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's laughter and little smudges all over my windows, and I wouldn't change a thing about it. Okay, let's see what the question jar has for you today.
I'm excited.
Ooh, what does enough look like for you these days?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's an interesting question because I was actually just talking to an author friend. Anyone who's been through the process can probably relate. There's always something else, So you get the agent and then you need the publisher. Okay, so you get the book deal and that's great. But then someone else got a better book deal and it's like, oh God, like am I worthless compared to this person? And your book comes out and there are reviews, but other people have more reviews and better reviews, and other people's books are selling better and getting more acclaim than you. So I feel like in this process specifically, I feel like I'm always looking for the next thing, and it's been exhausting. It really goes back to that quote that I mentioned that is on my phone lock screen, and in another universe, I'm dreaming of this life right here. Reminding myself that, like, okay, I wrote a book. And that's really cool. Like, it doesn't matter what lists it makes or how many stars on Goodreads it gets. This is something that I did, So can I just like rest with that and sit on that thought and be grateful for that and not constantly be looking for the next accolade or the next comparison point? My answer is book related because right now my mind is consumed by only the book. That's the only thing
That makes
playing in
sense.
my mind right now.
Yes, yes.
But yeah, hopefully that makes sense.
I think it's important for us to realize that we're doing incredible things and we can't always understand the effect that it's going to have on people. And I honestly think if your memoir makes one woman feel less alone or makes one family realize that maybe something could happen or is happening and saves one life, like, is that enough?
Yeah, that's a great point. A great way to look at it.
It's hard, especially when you pour your heart into something and it's such a meaningful thing. So I'm rooting for you, babe.
You were a great interviewer, by the way. I've been on a lot of podcasts, but I love this conversation. This has been
Oh,
really special.
thank you. That means a lot. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We will link how to buy your amazing memoir, Missing Me, in our show notes. And of course, I'll spit it out in all stories. And you guys pick up this memoir because even if you are not a woman, haven't experienced pregnancy or any sort of postpartum mental health disorder, I promise you will find something of value here, something to reflect on, something to feel seen and heard and understood. Thank you, Ayana, so much for coming on the show. Bye, love.
Bye.
And thank you all so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please do me a favor and rate the show wherever you listened and share this one with a friend. Maybe that perfectionist friend who needs a reminder that her worth is so much more than how she's perceived. Next week, I'm dropping a bite-sized episode on Kids, Wait Till You Hear This, the autobiography from EGOT icon Liza Minnelli. At nearly 80, she's finally ready to tell her story on her own terms, growing up as the daughter of Judy Garland and Vincent Minnelli, the marriages, the addiction, the financial ruin, the comebacks, and what it really means to spend a lifetime choosing joy over sympathy. You do not want to miss this one. Until then, take care.